let me introduce myself. My name is Harsh Singh. I head the healthcare division at Genzeon. We are a technology services and a product company that's focused on delivering outcomes for our clients, both in terms of business operations and clinical operations. We leverage technology like GenAI, which is what we are here to talk about today, to drive that automation and optimization for our clients. Very happy to see quite an audience here. I think it's a favorite topic of a lot of people. So very happy that we have more than 15 people today, which is what I was expecting. So that's good to see that it's still a relevant topic on a Saturday afternoon, so that's a good thing. We are here to talk about GenAI, whether it's helpful, is it a hype, and what essentially does that mean when it comes to applications, when it comes to health systems and providers, and how to consider, how to select which use cases you may want to implement or not implement. And here with me is a distinguished panel here. I will want to not butcher their introductions if I do it, but I'll have them do the introductions themselves. I'm very happy that they have taken the time to share their knowledge and wisdom with us. So with that, I'll pass it over to Shakib.
Mic check. Hear me? I'm also glad to see there's more than 4 people here on Saturday afternoon. It's wonderful. Shakib Akhtar, Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Information Officer at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Thank you, Shakib. Diana?
Sure. Diana Knoll. I'm the Executive Vice President, General Manager of the Nuance Healthcare business, which most people know is now bought by Microsoft for some time now. And so I'm also part of a bigger organization within Microsoft, the Health and Life Sciences Division.
Thank you, Diana. Deepti?
Hi, I'm Deepti Batina. I'm currently the CEO and founder of a new health AI company called Rhythm X AI. And prior to this, I was the Chief Product Officer of Humana. And the reason I say it as there's no peer on the panel here, so I'll wear both my current startup hat on, the peer hat on, and prior to that, I led operations for Nuance and Walters Global Health. So everybody here knows each other, the healthcare mafia.
Mafia is the right word there. Thank you. So I think with that, I think as you can see, what we have brought here as a panel is an amazing amount of energy. So we have brought together here an amazing amount of energy and wisdom on the AI space, both from a solution perspective as well as with Shakib's background on the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, we'll be looking for a provider perspective to this as well. So I think we are not here to send a message that AI is great and is the answer for everything. We are not here to say AI is bad. We are here to have a conversation about AI. So I think it's important that we are not coming in with a scripted message. We are not coming in to say, hey, we know what works. We are here to have a conversation. So I think that's the message. If you are expecting anything out of it which says, hey, AI is the solution for everything, probably you won't hear it. If you are expecting us to say AI is the problem child, which is causing all kinds of issues, you won't hear that either. It will be a combination. And I'm excited to have this conversation with not just the panel, but with you as well. Now, these are a couple of stats I want to throw out there. Not that you haven't seen enough stats already on GenAI. I'm sure you see decks all the time. But what is relevant here is that GenAI technology is happening, right? It is happening, it's ubiquitous, it's something that we all feel is going to impact the business that we are in. There is a stat that says 70% of business activities by 2030 will be impacted by GenAI. But what we are here to talk about is what activities when it comes to health systems are relevant and important that we need to be thinking about and talking about the use cases. So without further ado, let's get right into the meat of the conversation. And that is, what use cases are real, what are just hype? And I think I'm going to try to mix this up so that we can give a little bit of an interesting experience. I'm going to ask Diana first to speak on this topic. Diana, if you can share your thoughts on this end and say, hey, what do you see and what do you feel about it?
Sure, yes. I think you might be giving us all a little too much credit, though, if you say that we're experts, because I think we're all learning together. It has been quite an amazing year, and I've been in and around technology my whole career, but this is pretty impactful. It certainly is at a point now where we have the computing power to, kind of have AI really take the next step. And so the use cases, the other thing is, for me just personally, it's been an interesting journey as being part of a big tech company, obviously part of Microsoft. And so certainly we get exposed to the broader set of applicability of this technology. Always focused on productivity, really productivity breakthroughs, and obviously in healthcare we need that. I would say the three areas that people tend to sort of think about this placed in are content creation. So specifically in healthcare, we, from a Nuance perspective, we do content creation in terms of creating in an ambient fashion a clinical note that's under our DAPs. But if you think more broadly, there are examples that we certainly have seen already. People have put out there in terms of prior authorization. They have put out responses to emails. So anything that's really focused on augmenting the clinician, certainly they are still part of that loop. So I would say content creation is one area. The other area is really in interfaces. So it's not something new. Obviously, we have intelligent engagement solutions, patient engagement, member services engagement, but it's just becoming that much more able to handle complexity, and complexity in terms of the actual interface and being more specific to the question that is at hand with whoever is asking, right? That's where you get more complexity and more accuracy in terms of even things like what's coming out with Bing. So you have the interfaces. And then the last area, which is very broad, is really around data insights. And so some of the use cases that I've seen actually from clients that are working on things is data insights to better map, for one example, specialists to a patient that they're caring for. So they look and scan and try to make sure that the patient or the treatment that they're under is actually going to the right specialist. We also are working on things like a radiologist is doing the report, creating that content, but they actually need data insights from the prior reports, of course, especially if you're tracking like a person that's under cancer treatment, going through various treatments, and you're trying to pull up information. And radiologists are very transparent that as the day goes on, it's very difficult for them to get information out. So I think data insights is a very broad area, but because we can now have AI deal with some of the issues that we've had in the past around silos of data, disparate systems, complexity of data, image, text, etc., and the generative AI can pull it together, it's just much more intelligent and accurate. So those are some of the areas that we're certainly seeing.
Diana, thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's quite a comprehensive answer there. I'm quite curious, Deepti, as you launched a company that has an AI at the end of it. Obviously, you've gone through that exercise. Would you mind sharing some of your thoughts?
Sure. I'll share some thoughts based on current and again prior experiences as well, and I'll do a quick quiz on in the audience. Is in my prior experience when we had access to millions and millions of patients, we've looked at what are the key accelerators. Doesn't matter what disease you have. You could have diabetes, cancer, hypertension. If you had one of these three accelerators, you became sicker much faster. Quick polling. What do you think? Accelerator number one. Anybody? Yes.
Income.
Social determinants of health. Absolutely. Second one. Mental health. If you had diabetes, it's one thing, diabetes plus depression, you're going to get faster to the next level. Third, anybody?
Weight.
What is it?
Weight.
Yep, totally. Lifestyle with special focus on obesity. If you're smoking and you have sedentary lifestyle, you're different from somebody who has diabetes, hypertension, doesn't matter what the condition is, right? So there are some accelerators. And it's changing the way people practice medicine. Doesn't matter if you're an ECP or a nurse practitioner or a specialist, you're now supposed to look at clinical labs, family history, your lifestyle, social determinants of health, mental health. And all of this, while there is a shrinking workforce, an increasing aging population, and your time is shrinking. So I call it, a lot of people talk about administrative load, but there is a huge focus for us on cognitive load. And that is where it is, even if you give one more hour to each physician, it's impossible to do the cognitive burden we're talking about. You're supposed to parse hundreds of variables within seconds. And this is where we have AI, we have to embrace AI, run towards it versus run away from it. So that's one of the real areas, one example. And you also asked where it's the hype part is, I still think we need people for regulation. AI is not going to self-regulate itself. And someday when I'm on my deathbed, I don't want AI voice to be out and talking to me. I would love a real human being. The personal touch cannot be replaced. So there are some areas where there is hype, but you get it.
Yeah, thank you, Deepthi. That's again an interesting view around the hype as well. None of us want AI to be there as the only folks around us on our deathbed. So I seem to agree with that sentiment. But I think, among solution providers, I count myself as one, Microsoft, Rhythm AI, right? I think we have a certain viewpoint on how we think about using AI. But where the rubber meets the road, if you may, is in the clinician setting, in the health system. Shakib, I'd like your thoughts on how you see, as folks like us come to you and talk about solutions, how you see the evaluation of that exercise, what you think is helpful or hype in a healthcare setting. Would love your thoughts.
Sure. So I think as a chief digital officer, I'm supposed to give the answer that AI is going to solve everything. But you can't do that consciously. I think there's a couple of things. One, in terms of use cases for AI, I think the right answer is it's TBD. To be determined. What are the use cases? I think there's a lot of research and studies showing today that even the creators of these technologies don't know the limitations of their potential or their true capability, right? So if you saw Sam Altman's keynote, they're discovering capabilities. I mean, just through experimentation, I think was Diana was mentioning a bit as well. So I think that's one. We don't know what the true potential of this technology is. The second thing I would say is that, so when we talk about use cases within the healthcare setting for provider shop, I think there's a few. I think one is, I don't use the term artificial intelligence, I use the term augmented intelligence. It tends to go over much better with clinicians because it's not talking about replacement, it's talking about a co-pilot that can be next to you to help you do things a little faster, a little easier, and remove some, what we call a CHOP, para-clinical work. So it is not clinical, non-clinical work that physicians have to do or nurses have to do. Prior auth, faxing, documentation, searching, etc. How can we take all that work off of their plate? Most recent data that I've seen is, at least in our organization, that is about 10 to 20% of the clinicians' day every single day. So, operational efficiency is number one. I think physicians are in this world of you have to be more productive, you have to be more higher utilized. Well, then we need to make their life easier by becoming more operational efficient. So I think that would be one. I think the other area that I find very interesting is, there's a lot of time spent searching for information. How do I do X procedure? What's the appropriate clinical pathway? What's the protocol? As a nurse, how do I enter the GT? All of those things are essentially, to me, document discovery, searching, synthesis, which is a great use case for Gen AI because it can read, it can summarize, and it can synthesize that for you in a very meaningful way by just asking a question. Imagine you speak to you, say, what is the policy around X procedure and what's the appropriate clinical pathway, instead of going to a archaic policy management system and looking through hundreds of policies, which I'm sure most health systems have. Hopefully I'm not alone in that. And then the last thing I would say is code generation. So my background is in analytics, the Northwestern credentials, building the analytics infrastructure, was the chief analytics officer here at Shop, before being CIO. And I think the value proposition of analytics teams is fundamentally has to change with this technology. If you have a tool that can write 80% of your code effectively, and you don't need an analyst that knows SQL and R and Python, you have a tool that does all of that. Well, you should be able to generate the code pretty quickly. So I think what I've been taking my data analytics teams is your job now becomes driving the business and what is the recommendation, what's the story the data is telling you, and what's the next step I should take as a business leader or a clinician to help improve outcomes or improve business performance. So I think it's going to have a profound effect on data analytics.
Wow. I think we may have covered the whole session in those answers. I think, no, seriously, if you think about it, I think the comprehensiveness in the way you guys all have responded makes me think the sheer potential of the technology is so amazing. While at the same time, we've got to manage the risks and governance that's associated with using it. But thank you. I think Shakib, this was, I think when I think about an idea stacks like 10 to 20% of physicians' time is spent on things that are not needed, that's the real data that determines the value that the technology can bring to the table. So thank you for sharing that with us. What I want to do is talk about what framework in the organizations folks would use in selecting use cases that they want to do. Because I'm sure in the audience folks are thinking, well, that's great, but I have some ideas, I have some thoughts. What about those ideas? How do I select? How do I know the framework that's needed to evaluate, is that the right use case, is it the wrong use case? We put some thoughts. I think Diana started this conversation with, hey, what are the type of use cases that folks are seeing? And I think we've seen some patterns there. We talked about content generation, data analysis. I think Shakib hit on the data analysis piece on how not only can you analyze data, but how can now the development teams change, leveraging the skills and the technology that's available to us. We talked about user training and things change, and how can you on demand learn about things. And certainly the aspect of augmentation. With that concept, I want to go to Deepti first, possibly. If you could share, as you were starting the startup here, and maybe you can even tap back into your Humana background, what framework would you use to say, hey, which use cases did your startup want to do? How would you evaluate that? Could share some insights, that would be wonderful.
Sure, thanks, Harsh. So for the framework, there were 6 major categories I think of, and there are a lot of subcategories. For the interest of time, I'll keep it to 6 major categories. The first one is it a prioritized pain for the health systems or IDNs or peers, whoever it is you're serving? If it is not in the top 2 to 3 prioritized pain points, I wouldn't even begin with it, right? So that has to be number 1. It's not like I have a cool technology, what do you want to do with it versus understanding their pain and going back. The second thing is cost utility assessment, to be able to say there's going to be false negatives, false positives, and you look at clinically, financially, is it worth it from a cost utility assessment perspective. The third thing is on a company like ours, we have Rhythm X AI, and we need to think about, we have to do more than technology. What kind of training is it going to be needed? And the way the technology is going to be delivered has to be through a user experience that has to make it extremely easy to drive user adoption. Because at the end of the day, the world's best AI models are useless if you can't drive your end user adoption. So is that going to be there? And do you have enough resources, and are you committed enough to deliver ranging from training to user experience with everything that surrounds your AI? And the fourth thing is, again, is your customer, the health system or payer, ready to drive the change management that's required from their side? Because it needs top-down management support, you got to find your champions, because nobody cares about what I think, they're going to care about what Shakib thinks, right? And you have to find some champions to be able to say, do they support it, why? And sometimes it's going to require process changes, operational changes, and there may be new workflow edits to make it work. And if your customer is not committed to all of those, it's the failure guarantee, doesn't matter what you do. So you have to have that conversation up front. The fifth one is regulation and compliance. I always tell my teams, don't do anything that would have me end up in a jail. So please don't, that's the minimum. And the sixth one is ethics, bias, right? And every time there's data involved, there's bias involved because it's generated by human beings. And for me, I've worked around for it in the near future is, to Shakib's point, it has to be augmented intelligence co-pilot. It's not e-pilot, co-pilot. At the end of the day, doctors who are still trying to overcome their own subconscious, unconscious bias have to make sure that the right thing is being done. But acknowledging and understanding the bias that's involved in the software is going to be very important.
As I start to realize how little I know about things related to the panel that's sitting here, so I just keep getting reminded with every answer. Again, so Deepti, thanks again. I will say without bias that I do care about what you think, Diana thinks, and Shakib thinks. So not just Shakib, so he's one of my favorite guys, but so are both of you. So, but with that, Diana, from an industry perspective, you see more than just one company. You're talking to a good number of them. What are you seeing as the framework, as folks are talking about? How do they select the use cases?
Well, I think one thing is when we actually start to see the organization put together frameworks, it tells you that we're advancing on our maturity. So we've been involved with something under the Health Management Academy, and these are providers that actually are contributing and coming together and putting together a maturity model. And they really focus on many of the things that Deepti talked about. It's two areas really. It's culture and governance. And the culture does get into, does everybody have a common understanding of AI? Is there a business case? Is there champions? And on the right-hand side, they have on governance exactly what Deepti was representing. Is there regulatory areas, compliance, bias, those types of things. So the fact that these frameworks are evolving, and now I'm not exactly sure what we're going to see, but there's the executive orders that are coming out. I think there's been a lot more, not only in the healthcare industry, but obviously outside of that. So I think it's that's just an area that says it's here. It's not just hype, but now we're trying to get it into a stage where it's actually helpful and it has the right level of governance and control over it.
No, thank you, Diane. I just, I think again to the fact that if there are folks who are talking about governance, they are invested in it, right? They're invested in it. They are interested to make it happen, but make it happen in a responsible and a safe way, right? I think to that aspect of safety, I want to come to Shakib. Hey, at the end of the day, when we implement these technologies, right, the safety is paramount, right, in a clinical setting. How do you look at the use cases as you are thinking about from a health system standpoint? What makes it or what doesn't? What gets the cut and what doesn't?
Yeah, I think when we think about Gen AI, we fundamentally, myself and the CMO, we decided clinical is not the place to start.
Good.
With new technology, you don't start in the high risk, potentially high reward areas, right? Remember, there's blockchain and Duke and everything else, but that changed healthcare. So our and I think DT and Dan both covered really well. There's a lot of the components they covered already: governance, data bias, those types of things. So we want to start with, I think most health systems want to start in areas that are low risk, high impact. And as DT said, aligned with your strategic priorities. To me, the selection of our enablement framework is no different than any other technology. It should be strategically important. It should be a sizable use case. You have to define the ROI. Is it feasible? And will it be of high impact? And so we run it through the same frameworks we already have for the rest of our technology projects. I think there are special considerations, as in when you deploy it, and you start experimenting with it, we're going to come across some things we don't know. Like, does it behave the way we expect it to? Can it contextualize effectively? Same thing as predictive analytics. When we started deploying that, we learned that data quality is a large, step to make sure that the predictive models can be accurate. Similarly, I think we'll learn some of the same things here to make sure it's safe and effective. But the way we're thinking about it is start with the operational efficiency use cases, the productivity use cases, for operations, administrative staff, and then move into the clinical setting.
Yeah, no, I think, again, this is, I'll echo some of the conversations we ourselves are having at Genzeon with the clients, is exactly that, which is, hey, let's look at low-risk opportunities where we can show the difference, where we can show the value, and we can prove the value. I think that's the important part. I think folks are doing a lot of POCs, and that's great, but what have you proven? Where have you seen the ROI? So that's a very interesting aspect of the conversation. The question that comes up, and again, we may have hit on some of the points here, but where do we see the data's impact? And one of the conversations and research that was done recently across industries, and it was done by HFS Research, they talked about customer service, operations as an area with the biggest impact, right? So this research is not ours, it is shared, it's done by HFS Research, so I do give, all due credit to their research, but I wanted to share with this group, essentially the findings. We talked about, and this is a non-healthcare, this is across industries, but this aligns with the conversation panel is having, which is, operations admin, huge impact, right? Huge opportunity to do this. And, then there are the concept of what I think Shakib hit on, which is augmentation versus automation. Augmentation is an area where we look at provider use cases. I would like to hear maybe Shakib going to you first now. In terms of augmentation, what specific things that you think, in the admin space possibly, where you see opportunities and where you think the use cases could have the greatest impact?
Yeah, I think you're a real example. So I think the examples are limitless. So I had to write a job description for a role that I was hiring for. How does that typically start? You're looking at a blank Microsoft Word document and you're dreading for the next 3 hours you're going to have to write your job qualifications, summary, roles, responsibilities, team trip, etc. And I started with ChatGPT. And I said, could you, for a leading academic medical center, can you write me a job description of X with a goal of leading A, B, C, and D? And within 30 seconds, I had a job description that was 80% accurate, 85% accurate. I made a few tweaks to it based on my own needs, and I sent it off to HR. So I could then have lunch with my wife on vacation, right? And so it's a win-win. And so we're giving our, and then I think we have the muscle memory, like our operations folks haven't thought of it, or I had to build a work model. And I said, started with ChatGPT, and I said, give me a 3-year layout of an org structure if you were building a technology team, and over 3 years, tell me what roles, then put it in table format, then add the salaries, now put in a presentation you present to the CFO. I'm not ashamed to admit that. That saved me tens of hours of work. Now, I am the subject matter expert, hopefully, on that topic, so I know where it missed the mark on a number of things, salaries, some of the titles, etc. But you have to know, you cannot just blindly trust it. You have to know that going in. So I think it's really applicable to anything on the operational industry side of things. We are looking for it as a virtual assistant. I think is one of the biggest areas. So virtual assistant in terms of documenting meeting notes, action items, takeaways, doing these rote things like job descriptions, etc. I also think another big area for this is any area where you can triage questions and answer them in an automated way. So AI-enabled virtual agents. So we know chatbots. But I think this is a very large opportunity for AI-enabled virtual agents, and it's virtually the same use case across the board. And for the IT help desk, Today you have to search knowledge articles and say, how do I order my laptop, what's our policy around devices, all of that can be taught to what we're implementing called CHIME23 because we want to name something cute. And we're training it on our own documents for nurses, for HR policy, for nursing policy and procedures. So I think that's a lift and shift use case across the board. Our website, chatbot, AI-enabled chatbot, and our call center, which I think is another really big opportunity.
No, thank you. That's, I think job GPT is. If you can take some time and share with us, you've gone through some evaluation and figured out which use cases will have greatest impact. If you could share some insights on your end.
For me, one of the greatest areas, the list is long, but I'll select one for today, is finally the time has come for hyper-personalization in healthcare. Even as recent as 2 years ago, for millions of patients, we used to put them in like 4 gigantic segment buckets. And both Diane and I could be same age, same education, same everything, but still the way we communicate and preferences could be very different. And I call it hyper-personalization because healthcare industry in general has lagged so much. Right? Take retail. I've been married 23 years now. Amazon Prime knows more about me than my husband does. And it's like, I think you're running out of this. I think you really like this, and knows so much more. And you look at healthcare, we don't get the same thing. And it applies to both patients and doctors, right? For patients, there's many things like gender, which geography, the culture you grew up in, the education level you're in. There's so many things because of the way I communicate with you is different. Same thing with doctors too. Maybe I'll take information better as a graph, or as a table, or as just give me 2 lines, or just talk to me. It's like there is so much opportunity using GenAI to finally deliver hyper-personalization, and we should definitely make it happen.
Thank you. Diana, your thoughts?
I don't know if I can add much more to what we've already said. The only other thing that we're starting to see, I guess I would add, is just can GenAI help with more connections between like payer-provider things?
Mm-hmm.
So we know for a fact that, okay, you might have to have a prior authorization, but they need, what they're really looking for to determine whether the patient qualifies for imaging or surgery is sometimes a bit of information. So we have some clients talking to us about what do you get out of the radiology image and report, and how to get it more expeditiously and efficiently to the payer so that you can make decisions quicker. So that's an area that I hope is going to actually, because I think we've all experienced it, even personally, right, with yourself or family members. That's the other area that I think we're trying to figure out. Is there a way to, I don't know if it's GenAI, I don't know if it's just, being able to, because they're in disparate systems, maybe that'll help. So that's the other area I think that we haven't maybe touched on, is just the connecting points between all of the players within the ecosystem, life sciences, med tech, payer, provider.
No, thank you, Diana. I've started to visualize already in my head that payer has a bot for prior auth and provider has a bot for prior auth, and they're just talking to each other and they'll figure it out. So that's a fair point. There is a significant amount of spend in the healthcare ecosystem that is based on the payer-provider interaction. And, if I may use the word friction for a second. The friction between the 2 entities, structural friction, if I may. But I think where the technology can help certainly is bring to bear the speed at which things can be summarized and brought to bear so the decisions can move faster, hopefully helping with the experience, the end experience of the patient themselves, right? So I think that's an area of interest where we are spending some time in our payer interactions as well, which is really not so much reducing the friction, but at least reducing the time of our engagement between payers and providers as well. The favorite topic, obviously there has been controversy, I think we would be remiss to ignore the fact that folks have said governance is needed. Folks have said things could go haywire. As I was saying, payer and provider bots figuring it out on their own, that could yield to some undesirable results as well, right? So there is controversy on where to draw the boundary. What is responsible? What is the level of governance? What's the level of regulation that's needed? And on that topic, I'd like to, Diana, if you can talk a little bit about possibly where do you see that conflict? Where do you see, I know we've seen governments start to participate in this. What do you see happening?
Well, I think we already touched on one that almost every client that we talk to is saying we're staying away from like clinical diagnosis, things like that. And we already mentioned that, but I am actually, I am continually surprised about the things that people do think about as they consider the governance over systems, even for what we've talked about as far as the examples. So in the space that we sit in terms of automating clinical documentation, you still have the physician that always signs off on it, right? And we had a client say, well, I'm a little concerned about what if people just get so used to seeing it that they just kind of like check it off, check it off, check it off. And so one of our customers actually said, well, they've been able to figure out like monitoring how long somebody may actually stay in the note. So it's going to be interesting to see how these things actually come out, because there's a lot of good questioning that happens, and you think you may have the answer to say, well, you know, the physician is always going to ultimately sign off. But people are already starting to think about, okay, but how will you actually govern it in a real world situation, which I find it's, again, it just shows us how advanced we're getting in terms of the things that we're thinking about at this stage. Certainly also a lot of people are like, is it going to scale? Does it scale across languages? Does it scale across countries? Does it scale from a cost perspective? How much does this actually cost? How much is it going to cost our clients? We get asked that all the time. So I think the aspect of how it will scale across specialties, environments, wherever care is done, wherever things are done. So a lot of questions now about, I don't want to just use it in a niche area or one specific area. I want to use it globally, and I want to set standards around it, governance, but then it kind of gets to immediately how is it going to scale.
Yeah, scale is a big question. I think, you know, I can see the audience probably thinking about how they're going to go back and try to have that conversation internally within their organization. So, Deepti, if you can share some thoughts on your end and areas as you go pitch solutions, what are you seeing as the areas where folks are concerned about?
So a couple of big controversies, I would say one thing far off and something in the shorter term. How many people here have watched the movie Matrix? Oh, a lot. So some people think this is the beginning of the Matrix in real life, what's happening with Gen AI. Can't tell you how many, but there is this controversy of this is going to be the big Terminator kind of thing. But all kidding aside, in the shorter term, the bigger controversy is healthcare has never been the super innovator of all industries. This would be like at 50 years, like, can we even move fast, right? And where I differ in my own opinion about Gen AI is if we look at healthcare industry during COVID time, people were dying in huge numbers in front of our eyes, and we all came together, the ecosystem. I was at Humana at that time, the payers, providers, everybody came together, pharma, at an incredible speed to deliver great results. But there, the driving force for us was death, right? Large numbers were dying in front of our eyes if we didn't come together and act. And for me, personally, Gen AI, I don't even see it as an evolution. I see it as a fundamental revolution of mankind. How knowledge is going to be reshaped, how experience is going to be reshaped. And it's just amazing. And my call to action for the healthcare industry is we don't need death to be our driving force. In this case, the change agent is an extremely positive technology. Let's run towards it and drive change at the same speed.
Thank you. That's quite a call to action there. Shakib, would you buy into that call to action?
I think yes. I think it is time to revisit a lot of our operational workflows. We're using new technology that's available. And taking a step back, remind everybody that Gen AI is one subset branch of a larger branch of artificial intelligence. So I think we do have to kind of reframe our mindset. There are 7 branches of artificial intelligence. Many of them are not being utilized effectively, including Gen AI. You know, if you think about machine learning, vision, right? There's lots of other opportunities that we could be utilizing. That would be the first thing I would say. So let's not just only focus on Gen AI. The second component is safety. I think from a provider perspective and a user of the technology, safety is the thing that we hear the most often is how will it be governed? How do we know that it's safe? And so we really need to think about that. The governance frameworks that Diana talked about, that's critically important. How do we govern it? And this is not a one and done exercise. The quality of algorithms only goes one way. It degrades over time, right? It's called drift, and in your models. So your models are always decreasing in quality. They're not maintained. So what's the maintenance cycle? Who's watching over that? And how do we make sure it's still safe and effective continuously is one big area. I also think another controversial area is bias in the information. And this is as good as what the outputs are as good as the inputs. And you have to be very careful just blindly trusting the outputs. Misinformation is a big concern, deep fakes, you've heard a lot about that. That's a big concern. I also think this concept in healthcare in particular, always having a human in the loop. And so that I resonate that very greatly. I think there are folks that think that things can be automated end to end, but in many cases that's likely not the case, particularly when it comes to clinical care. In some cases, operationally, absolutely, but you have to have the right guardrails, governance around that. So those are some of the controversial areas. And the last thing, Jordy talked about earlier, what she already mentioned was cost. Which every provider of AI is so in the provider space, providers in a space where majority of hospital systems are not making money. So I think the question then is, how do you adopt AI in a way that you can show ROI, and how do partners show and you say, let's help trial, test, prove up the value so that you can make the business case and let's make it cost effective. And I know a number of organizations are trying to do that to make that more feasible, but that's going to be a real concern because the potential can only be realized if we can actually afford to adopt it.
I think what's interesting is that now we have more competition and that should drive down costs, but at the same time, you have things that are open source and how well are they governed. So it's this interesting tension of, especially in healthcare like no other, you need to have that balance, right?
Can I say one more thing, Harsh? Absolutely. Sorry, I hadn't written that, but security. Yes, I think as a provider, CIO, CDIO, cybersecurity is a very large concern. Data ownership, property rights, what are you putting in, open AI tools and other AI tools, like I said, that are not governed, less governed. How do you make sure that you protect yourself from any sort of harm, a data breach, and protect the security of your patients? So that's a large concern.
Wow. Again, I listened to this group and I prepped with this group as we prepared for this session, and I feel like, I sit here and listen and I have like 6 things I already am going through. Hey, I got to note it down and I got to go deeper and learn about it. So this is an amazing conversation, but I think the conversation is never complete without the audience participating. So what we want to do is open it up for questions so that you have a chance to ask questions to this distinguished guest and experts. And
thank you. So I grew up with an AI co-pilot that was ethical, data, I feel like sometimes talking to my colleagues that that's what we're trying to fit AI into, ethical co-pilot that's there for us to analyze data, give us recommendations and those kind of things, but based on unethical, obviously, AI that'll come along with this. And sometimes we compare it to kind of the internet hitting the stage, how we utilize the internet those kinds of things. It was also used for bad things. But we didn't really present that as a platform or something that we contained and put into different environments and into healthcare or financials and things like that. It just kind of was an evolution, a revolution, as you stated. What are some of the things that you're talking about looking at, kind of from the security and compliance and governance aspect, to get ahead of that and watch for the inevitable, unethical entry into the ethical AI?
If you can share your name as well, if you don't mind.
Craig Gleason.
Greg, thank you for the question. I'll pass that question along over to the panel members.
I think it's a good question. I think I referenced it a little bit related to our security stance associated with this. I think a couple of things. One is we are taking a measured approach to what we allow our organization's folks to access. And I think the first one is education. So when ChatGPT and other models first hit prime time, we issued a memo. And we said, I think the title of the memo was Balancing Innovation with Risk. And we said we encourage you to use this technology, but use it safely and effectively. And here are the guardrails that we should be using it. It hallucinates, and it can do not enter any patient data, the open version of ChatGPT, and et cetera, those types of things. I think when we're also taking a look at what our partners are implementing and how they're implementing it, so our platforms that we have within the organization are all, I would call it an arms race to enable AI into your native workflows. Everybody's trying to do that right now. So we are talking to them about what are your governance frameworks, how did you design this model, show us, it's very similar to the advanced analytics conversations we had, which was, show us the models, show us behind the scene, white paper on this, and then walk us through how you're managing it effectively. As far as, for more broadly, I don't know that there's a good question, a good answer to managing unethical AI. I think it's so young that people are still struggling with figuring out what was created by AI in the first place, right? What is real and what isn't, which is the misinformation comment I made earlier. So that I think there needs to be some tool advancement in that space. And we need to keep a very vigilant eye until set tools are developed so that we can do a better job of assessing what is real and what's not.
Thank you, Shakib. I think that's an interesting answer. I want to make sure we're coming back to the group.
I think also what is good is that the industry kind of helps as a vendor, helps us get there. Of course, there's standards, there's HITRUST, there's SOC 2, there's FedRAMP, there's state grants. There's also we get asked emerging questions when we go through client RFPs around show us how you actually help to eliminate bias. We obviously have a lot of resources within Microsoft that we can lean on. So I think that's another thing, back to the points of we just have to keep evolving and having these governance, these frameworks, everything we've talked about today will help us kind of get to the good spot that we need to keep getting to.
One last thing I would add is in pursuit of operational efficiencies, sometimes we ignore the really hard problem in healthcare. I'll give you an example. Sometimes the health systems may be looking for, I'm going to prioritize patients who are actually going to show up and deprioritize if the chance of them not being a not-show is lower. Or sometimes if you're a payer, you could be looking at propensity to engage is higher based on past data. But in that process, what you're doing is widening the socioeconomic divide. But hey, if you measure it by operational efficiency, you're going to do it. Nobody's trying to be intentionally unethical, but if sometimes we are trying to do the right thing and we go after pure operational efficiencies, nobody will go to jail, but you're causing a lot of, unintentional, unethical divide in the industry.
Thank you. I think one final comment. I'm sorry. Yeah, just one comment I'll add to finish the thought there for Greg. I think, Greg, one of the things we have realized as we talk to clients is the solution is only as good as what the input is. So folks are controlling the data that goes into it, right? You're not just using public models to answer the questions. They're controlling the data set that goes into it, and the quality of the data matters. So I think hopefully that answers the question, right? With that, I'm going to hand it over to the...
I think we have to be a little thoughtful of the fact that I think we have people going to focus groups in about 10 minutes.
No, thank you. Thank you.
So I think some of us can say, I know I have to be in a focus group in 10 minutes, so just want to be
All right, maybe we'll do the last question and I'll take your question and we'll get into the group and get the answer as well. But I'll take the one in the back first. Okay.
Thank you, very informative. Transformational technologies often create winners and losers. You know, the internet obviously bankrupted some companies, created winners, same thing with mobile. If we presume Gen AI, other AI technologies has transformational shifts going forward, how do you rate the incumbents staying in their existing positions, be it payers and providers, versus new entrants leapfrogging technologies, and what are the opportunities? So what categories of companies are going to get hurt that are incumbents? What categories are going to leapfrog?
Yeah, before the panel answers it, I just want to say, folks who are leaving, if you can provide some feedback on your app, that would be great. With that, I'm going to use that as the last question that the panel will answer. Diana, thanks for the time check there.
Well, it's hard to predict because I've been in companies that I thought were going to win and they didn't win, and so we all experience. I think competition is good, right? It's going to help us learn, but at the same time, I think the other side of it is we are in an industry that does need to have governance and safety. So we'll have to see because it's always this aspect also scalability, right? So it's that. The new innovation, that's good for all of us. It causes all of us to think and be fast and be better, but I think you also have the balance of, we also have to have scalability and we have to have the right governance. So we'll have to see. It's hard to predict.
I can answer that from a couple of different angles. There are two things I think the winners will have. One is, you look at latest technologies like whether it's Gen AI and other types of AI, you mentioned, it's not just about some UI UX or user experience. We, as a Gen AI first company, are looking at everything from coding to QA to security, literally applying latest technologies in every function, ranging from legal to HR as well. And the more you're stuck in the past and not changing fast, I think that's one recipe for failure. And the second thing is, we are big believers in you can deliver tangible ROI literally within months of implementation. Writing is on the wall that you get, you won't be able to break the cut because transformation is a right a company earns as long as you can deliver tangible ROI in the short term. Otherwise, you don't exist to transform anything.
Thank you. Shakib, any final thoughts?
I would just add very quickly, just a little bit to that, is I think there's this thread that Gen AI completely transforms the way the world works. I think what's true is going to continue to be true. The businesses that will succeed will be the ones that can solve a meaningful business problem, do it at a reasonable cost, and scale it effectively and efficiently. Like there's always been the business model winners, continue. But I think there is a very large new market of what can be solved by this. And it opens a new industry door. Sarah, well, who can utilize this most effectively? Like I think it's very hard to predict who's going to be winners and losers. But I think it's probably easy to say generally that those that don't figure out how to adopt this will likely be will be at a disadvantage than those that do.
Thank you. I want to say thanks a lot to the panel and to the audience. Thank you for spending